In recent days, Israel has experienced an unprecedented wave of massive protests. Around 700,000 people across the country have taken to the streets, with 500,000 of them concentrated in the capital, Tel Aviv. The main roads have become crowded, and the media has described the protests as an endless sea of people. Question is, why is Israel facing such a situation? Protests erupted not only because of ordinary economic or social issues. The deeper cause is the ongoing 11-month-long war between Israel and Hamas forces in the Gaza Strip. The war began in early October of last year when Israel was suddenly attacked by thousands of rockets from Hamas, resulting in significant loss of life. This surprise attack caught both the Israeli government and military off guard, leaving them unable to respond promptly. Since then, Israel has launched a full-scale counteroffensive aimed at destroying Hamas. However, this 11-month-long war has not only brought suffering to the people of Gaza, but also inflicted many losses on Israel, especially with the capture of hundreds of Israeli hostages by Hamas. The Israeli military has made every effort to rescue them, but has not succeeded, and this failure has angered the public. The Gaza Strip has become a battlefield. The Israeli military has carried out airstrikes to eliminate Hamas, causing extensive damage to both military and civilian infrastructure. However, the problem lies in the complex tunnel system that Hamas has built. These systems allow Hamas to hide and maintain its strength. Even though Israel has destroyed much of the above-ground infrastructure, they have been unable to fully access the underground tunnels, leading to a stalemate in the war. One of Israel's top priorities is to ensure that Hamas will never be able to attack the country again. But, given the current situation, achieving this goal is more difficult than ever. One of the biggest issues now is the fate of the hostages held by Hamas. Hundreds of Israelis, including American citizens, are being held by Hamas at undisclosed locations within the tunnel system. Every time the Israeli military tries to attack Hamas-held areas, the number of hostages decreases as Hamas retaliates by killing them. The situation worsened when 6 hostages were recently found dead and decomposed. This ignited a public outcry in Israel. People criticized the government and the military for failing to rescue the hostages during the past 11 months, despite having eliminated many Hamas leaders. The protests are not only directed against Hamas, but also against the Israeli government. People are demanding a peaceful solution, arguing that military action has not helped in rescuing the hostages and may worsen the situation. They are calling on the government to consider negotiations instead of continuing military operations. However, a significant portion of the public still believes that Hamas must be completely destroyed to prevent future attacks. After many meetings, the Israeli government decided to keep the military in this corridor to prevent Hamas from rearming the ground. This means that negotiations remain at a standstill, and the situation will likely continue for the foreseeable future. The current situation in Israel is going through a tense and violent phase, as tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest against the government. This political and social crisis is not only about policy disagreements, but has escalated into a battle over power, religion, and trust. Particularly, disagreements over judicial reform and conflicts with armed groups like Hamas in Gaza plunged Israel into a prolonged cycle of violence, affecting not only the nation itself, but also spreading across the region and drawing international attention. The sight of thousands of protesters shouting for freedom and justice easily reminds us of biblical stories, where struggles for justice and peace are ever present. The image of the Jewish people living in slavery in Egypt under Pharaoh's rule, or the uprisings of the Israelites during the time of the kings in the Old Testament, are parallels to the current situation of the Israeli people today. Looking at the history of the people of Israel in the Bible, we can see that this is not the first time this nation has faced great trials. From the time of their patriarch Abraham, through the exiles in Egypt, Babylon, and the periods of exile, God's people have endured slavery, war, and dispersion. But what makes the history of Israel unique is that they always sought to return to God, seeking His salvation and protection. They believed that God would deliver them from their suffering. just as he saved them from the hand of Pharaoh in the story of Exodus. In the Bible, the deliverance from Egypt is described as one of God's greatest miracles, where he parted the Red Sea for his people to cross. This image is not only a historical story, but also a symbol of liberation from sin, suffering, and the manifestation of God's boundless power. Today, looking at Israel's current context, we can recognize that, like the Israelites of old, they are seeking a way out of the political crises and conflicts they are currently facing. For Christians, the trials Israel is now facing may serve as a reminder of Jesus' mission when he came to the world. He not only brought a message of love and forgiveness, but also called for peace among all people, regardless of who they are, their nationality, or their religion. In the New Testament, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. This teaching is of particular value in the current context. When faced with division and violence, Christians can contribute to building peace by acting with love and compassion. A significant lesson from the Bible is the story of King David abandoning violence and seeking forgiveness from God. After committing sins that led to the death of others, David not only took responsibility for his actions, but also turned to God with a repentant heart. It was this repentance that allowed him to be forgiven and continue his life with a renewed heart, with a stronger faith in God. This story is a prime example of how, no matter how grave one's mistakes are, if they seek forgiveness and guidance from God, they will find the path to peace and tranquility. In the current situation in Israel, as in any conflict in the world, path of forgiveness and repentance may be the key to ending violence and building peace. The current political crisis in Israel is multifaceted. Prolonged protests against the government's judicial reform policies have caused deep divisions in society. Many Israelis fear that these reforms may undermine the independence of the courts and the legal system, while also giving the government more control over power. This is why thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest, demonstrating their determination to defend fairness and democracy. Throughout Israel's history, God's people have always faced great challenges and continuously struggled to defend justice and peace. However, what makes their history remarkable is their constant return to God, no matter how difficult the circumstances. For Christians, the current crisis in Israel is not just a political conflict, but also a lesson in faith, trust in God, and the ability to forgive and reconcile. Since the Old Testament, God has repeatedly reminded his people of the importance of justice and righteousness. In the book of Isaiah, he says, "Seek justice, encourage the oppressed, defend the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow." Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. This shows that justice is not just a social value, but a divine requirement. However, justice cannot be achieved through violence or war. It can only be attained when people are willing to listen and act according to God's guidance. In the context of the current crisis, prayer and faith play an incredibly important role. When people feel there is no way out, when violence and division seem to prevail, prayer becomes the guiding light, helping people realize that true peace does not come from the power of weapons or political authority, but from kindness, forgiveness, and love. In the Bible, we see many times that God listens to the prayers of his people, such as when they were exiled in Babylon or oppressed by surrounding enemies. In each instance, God responded with salvation and brought peace. One of the most powerful images of peace in the Bible is in the book of Revelation, where Jesus is described as the King of Peace, who comes to end all division and violence. However, the peace he brings is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of love, forgiveness, and compassion. This is the true peace that all Christians long for. For the Christian life, the events happening in Israel today are a reminder of the importance of living according to the teachings of Jesus. He taught us, "Love your enemies and praise who persecute you." Matthew chapter 5, verse 44. This is a challenging teaching, but it is also the only path to finding true peace. As we look at the conflict in Israel, we cannot help but reflect on these teachings. Violence and hatred can only prolong suffering, whereas love and forgiveness can heal wounds and bring peace. Throughout Christian history, many saints and believers have chosen the path of peace, no matter the challenges or dangers they face. Saint Francis of Assisi is a prime example. During the Crusades, when conflict between Christians and Muslims was at its peak, Saint Francis, thank you for joining us on Daily Bible Sacred. As we reflect on the profound lessons from Israel's current struggles, let us carry forward the message of peace, compassion, and forgiveness in our own lives. Stay tuned for more insights and reflections. May we all work towards a world where justice and harmony prevail. God bless you.